Holiness, we've met for 40 years on different continents. It's a great joy to see you again, because your presence itself is happiness. To discuss happiness is one thing. To discuss happiness is one thing, to be happy is something else. And the paradox of our world is that in order to listen to a lecture on happiness, people have to stand in line for 2 hours unhappily to get in. That's the world in which we live. Allow me to make a few comments from the point of the Islamic tradition upon the brief but very fecund and profound comments that you made upon happiness. First of all, this division between physical happiness and meditational, I prefer that to mental happiness. If you allow me to use a presumptuous Buddhist term, which has a very deep Islamic resonance, one perhaps can talk about nirvanic happiness and samsaric happiness. But samsaric happiness is really a mirage, and it's that which we pursue most of our life. From the Islamic point of view, the word for happiness which appears in the Quran, sacred scripture of Islam, is the word السعادة, syed, a whole series of terms which are related to each other, and is identified very clearly with the paradisal state. That is the state of those in paradise, in heaven. There are many other terms, of course, which have correspondences to Buddhist eschatology. You have written a wonderful book about this. Somebody should compare that with the Abrahamic eschatologies. But that means something very deep. That is, we live in a world in which we're not often happy, but we never leave the pursuit of happiness, which means itself that we're not really made for this world alone. The very fact that we are never fully satisfied with all the physical and psychological demands of our lower passionate soul means that we're not only that. So unhappiness itself is the proof, in a sense, of our spiritual character. Otherwise, everyone would be happy in doing everyday things. And every happiness that we seek outside of spiritual happiness comes to an end, and the ending is always sadness. What separates happiness from the experiences of life other than happiness is sorrow, longing, separation, termination, pain, all of these things, all of which mean that the state of happiness for those who only seek it in the samsaric world, in a sense, is always temporal finitude. It always comes to an end. And that is, I think, one of the deepest intuitions that all the religions of the world have presented to human beings. In Islam, we do not only talk about the pursuit of happiness, unless by pursuit you mean a kind of profession, but pursuit in the ordinary sense of pursuing, but the attainment of happiness. We are in this world not only to pursue happiness, but to attain it. Because there are some people who have the idea that it's life itself, or even the truth, there's no such thing as truth. I'm a philosopher, I speak for one moment as that. Just following the truth is enough. Whereas our traditions believe that what is important is to attain happiness, as Your Holiness have also said in so many of your writings. Then you pointed very briefly to something which is extremely important, and that is the levels of happiness. Happiness is not only one level. Everything in the deepest sense in our universe is layered, it's hierarchic, it's structured. I don't mean in a political sense, I mean in an inward sense, in the sense that you are the Dalai Lama and the simple peasant who doesn't have your knowledge at all in Tibet, and there are all levels in between. And happiness is the same way. Somehow our soul realizes that there are modes of happiness, and each human being characterizes his life according to what he or she conceives this mode of hierarchy to be. That what is it that makes me most happy? Then what is the second one? What is the third one? And people who go through life without being able to smile at the moment of death are usually those who've gotten the priorities wrong, have not been able to see this hierarchy. Of course, there's happiness in drinking a cold glass of water when we are thirsty. Not, of course, saying cola is happiness, which I received on the airplane as I was coming down here. I don't mean that. All the way from that to what you alluded to, meditation, concentration, reaching the nirvanic consciousness. In the same way that we have levels of consciousness, there are levels of happiness. And happiness is the human being who through life can go through these various stages. Happiness, it does not preclude or exclude social happiness, but it is not only social happiness. Happiness has to start from within us. It's a happy human being who creates a happy ambience. A happy ambience does not necessarily create a happy human being. Let me just conclude, because I only have a few minutes to speak. In the philosophical sense, to be happy is to be oneself. And here the Islamic tradition emphasizes that God created us with a primordial nature, what we call din al-fitra or al-fitra in Arabic, with primordial nature. And that primordial nature was combined with joy and happiness. It was paradisal. And so, in a sense, happiness is our right, but not as fallen beings. We first have to rediscover that primordial nature. And life's goal is precisely to rediscover who we are. Once we know who we are happy. There are very few human beings in the modern world who are happy with themselves. I have many friends who go to some village in Afghanistan before it was bombed, or India or someplace, and see that people are happy. They say, what right do you have to be happy? You don't have television, you don't have refrigerator, you don't get stuck in 495 traffic like I do 5 hours a day in Washington. That part they don't say. They think that happiness should be impossible in those states. It's because they do not realize that these people are perhaps closer to being who they really are. They have also fallen, but not as much as this totally exteriorized modern human being who has to always concentrate all of his energies outwardly. And I could not but agree 100% with what our dear rabbi said about consumerism. We live in a world in which we are fooled into accepting the causes of unhappiness as happiness. And that is one of the great tragedies which is resulting now in our destruction of the very environment in which we live. The environmental crisis is due to this substitution, really. It's to do, of course, to a false science of nature and all of those things, but also to a consumerist philosophy which believes that happiness is to have, is to want more and more. Once he was asked of a great Sufi master from Khorasan, what do you want? He said, I want not to want. That is the epitome of happiness. And in conclusion, just let me quote one single Arabic sentence, very famous proverb, that it says, Man asha sa'idan mata sa'idan. That is, he who lives happily dies happily. And happiness is a permanent state of the soul, and we are here to attain it. Thank you.
Thank you.